Hello guys, welcome back. Today we're going to discuss about chapter 18 chemical tests of unit 2. So the topics that we are going to discuss today is to describe the test for some common gases such as hydrogen, oxygen, carbon dioxide, ammonia and chlorine, and we will learn how to carry out a flame test. And afterwards, in this video, we are going to discuss about how to do chemical tests for positive ions by using flame test and adding sodium hydroxide solution. For the testing for hydrogen gas, what we would do is hold a lighted splint near the mouth of the test tube, and the hydrogen is going to explode with a squeaky pop. So a squeaky pop is your answer key here. Okay, so you must include this. So the equation for this reaction would be hydrogen plus oxygen will produce water. The test for oxygen gas is you will put a glowing splint, okay, near the test tube containing oxygen gas, and if the test tube or the flask contains oxygen, it's going to relight the glowing splint. That's it. Alright, so you can see the videos as here as well. So in this test for oxygen gas, relights is your keyword. Now the test for carbon dioxide gas, what we're going to do is pass carbon dioxide gas into calcium hydroxide, which is lime water. So this will be your lime water, which is calcium hydroxide, and we will be passing carbon dioxide gas through this tiny tube here. And then when calcium hydroxide reacts with carbon dioxide, it will form calcium carbonate, which will be a milky, cloudy white precipitate, as we can see in the pictures on the right side. So the test for chlorine gas. So what we would do is put a piece of dry litmus paper or universal indicator into a test tube, and chlorine, since it is an acidic gas, it will turn the damp blue litmus paper or universal indicator into red, and afterwards it will bleach the litmus paper. So the keywords here that you should definitely include in your answer is damp litmus paper, and then it will turn it into red first, and then it's going to bleach. Okay, so it's important that you include all three of this information in the test for chlorine gas. And chlorine is able to turn blue litmus paper into red because it is an acidic gas. Now the test for ammonia gas, similar to chlorine gas, you're going to put a piece of dry litmus paper or universal indicator into a test tube, and ammonia will turn this damp. Okay, as usual, I keep mentioning damp is your keyword, you must definitely include. Okay, will turn the damp red litmus paper into blue because ammonia is the alkaline gas. Now, how do we test whether there is water or not? Okay, so water will turn anhydrous copper 2 sulfate, which is a white powder, into blue. So in the picture on the left side, this is a simple copper 2 sulfate, anhydrous copper 2 sulfate, which does not have water at all. That's why it's powder like an ash, and it is white powder. If we put water into it, if we pour down water into it, we're going to form copper 2 sulfate crystals, which are blue crystals that we know before. Alright, so anhydrous copper 2 sulfate, if you put water into it, we will get hydrated copper 2 sulfate crystals. Now the test for water purity. So if we want to test out whether water is pure or not, what we can do is measure the melting point and the boiling point. If your water is pure, it will boil exactly at 100 degrees Celsius. If your water is pure, it will freeze exactly at 0 degrees Celsius. If your water is impure, and it includes impurities, your water will freeze lower than 0 degrees Celsius, and it will boil at a temperature higher than 100 degrees Celsius. Now, the test for positive ions or cations by using flame test. Now, a flame test will show the presence of metal ions or cations in a compound. Now, if they ask you to describe how to carry out a flame test, first what you would tell them is you're going to clean a platinum or nichrome wire by dipping the wire into concentrated hydrochloric acid and then into a flame until no color shows. So first you would have a jar of HCl, right? And you will put your wire into here, and this jar will have HCl. The reason why you're doing this is to clear off any impurities first, and then you're going to show it under a Bunsen burner. And if the flame does not have any colors, then you know that your platinum or nichrome wire is free of impurities and you can begin your experiment. So what you would do is you're going to dip your wire into the HCl again, and then this time if you want to test out, let's say, sodium sulfate, this will be your sodium sulfate salt, and you're going to soak your wire into this bowl, and it is going to bring it over to the Bunsen burner again. And this time, based on this color, you're going to decide what metal ions are present. Okay, so try to learn this step-by-step procedure on the right side as well. Now, for the results, if your flame shows red, it contains lithium ions. If it is yellow, you have sodium ions. If you have lilac color, you have potassium ions. If you have orange red colors, you have calcium ions. You don't need to know much about blue green because of copper 2, because for copper 2 we will use sodium hydroxide as our primary method. So from this you need to learn the color and the respective positive ions as well. In exam they can ask you this two ways. Your flame color is red, what is your ion? Your ion is lithium, what is your flame color? Okay, now after we learn about the flame test, now we're going to learn about adding sodium hydroxide. So for copper 2 ions, we are simply going to add sodium hydroxide to copper 2 sulfate solution, and the result of the reaction, which is copper 2 hydroxide, will be a blue solid precipitate. And in exams you might be asked to write the ionic equation, so try to write this down on your own as well, which is very simple. But what you need to be careful here is copper 2 hydroxide, since it is a blue precipitate here, it is a solid. And in the process you can remove any spectator ions such as SO42 minus, SO42 minus, Na plus, and Na plus. The net ionic equation would be Cu2 plus plus OH minus would react to give CuOH twice. Now, the test for iron 2 ions, you're going to follow the similar procedure. Add sodium hydroxide to any iron 2 compound solution. In this example here, we are using iron 2 sulfate, FeSO4. So if you put sodium hydroxide into iron 2 sulfate, you will get an iron 2 hydroxide precipitate, which has a green precipitate color, as we can see here. Let's try to look at the video here. We're going to add NaOH into iron 2 sulfate, and a solid precipitate of iron 2 hydroxide will be formed. As usual, you might be asked to write down the ionic equations, so practice on that as well. For testing iron 3 ions, such as iron 3 chloride, what you would do is similar to your previous experiments. Add sodium hydroxide and an orange-brown precipitate of iron 3 hydroxide will be formed. Let's take a look at the video. First, you would have your iron 3 chloride, and then you're going to add sodium hydroxide, and you see that a solid precipitate of iron 3 hydroxide is being formed. Again, please writing down this ionic equation and your final ionic equation as well. They might ask you about that in the exam. Now, testing for ammonium ions is similar to what we have done before. Add sodium hydroxide to any ammonium salt such as ammonium chloride, ammonium bromide, ammonium iodide. Alright, if it is cold, you can smell the ammonia gas. But if it is warm, the ammonia gas is going to come up, which is an alkaline gas, and it will turn the red litmus paper or universal indicator into blue. What you should notice here, which is different from your previous examples, is that instead of forming a solid, you are going to form an ammonia gas here. Okay, and this ammonia gas is going to turn the red litmus paper into blue. So please practice writing down these ionic equations as well. Alright, so I would like to summarize our methods on how to test for positive ions. Okay, so if we have positive ions or cations, there are two tests that we do. Now, the first test that we have is called a flame test. So a flame test can be used to detect potassium, sodium, lithium, calcium ions. Okay, so potassium will give us a lilac flame, sodium will give us a yellow flame, lithium will give us a red flame, and Ca2 plus will give us an orange red flame. Alright, so as for another one, we are going to add sodium hydroxide. If we have copper ions, we will have a blue precipitate of copper 2 hydroxide. If we have iron 2 hydroxide, we will produce a green precipitate of iron 2 hydroxide. If we have iron 3 ions, we are going to have orange or brown precipitate of FeOH thrice. And if we have ammonia, we are going to produce an ammonia gas, which will turn the red litmus paper into blue. So this is the summary for the positive ions cations test. So the only thing that you need to focus more on here is your method to carry out a flame test, okay, which involves a platinum or nichrome wire. You cleanse it by putting it under HCl first, then you dip it into the salt that you want to test, and then put it under the Bunsen flame. Alright, that's all for today's lesson, and in the next video we're going to discuss about tests for negative ions or anions.